And if we do a show here, yes,
we're doing
a show. You're already recording, aren't you?
It's a Harry Potter show.
Harry Potter lives.
1.
Hey there, Canada. I'm David Fitzgerald, and I took a left at the Valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you from Bible Belt, BC, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin, and I asked my girlfriend why she never blinked during foreplay. She said she didn't have time.
Oh my gosh.
Damn.
Joining me as usual is the team that absolutely looks like they need a drink. He thinks
coffee.
Coffee, yes.
Coffee.
He thinks that what's better than roses on a piano are tulips on an organ. Scott. And her smile is like Expelliarmus, simple, disarming. Kristen.
Oh my god, you did a Harry Potter show!
I totally did.
That's sorry for the crackle, guys. It was just my excitement.
And she'll treat you like a pirate and take your booty, Kirsten.
Absolutely.
Guys, welcome back. So today we'll be talking to our old friend Luke Fevin. We'll be talking again how religion is trying to insert itself into the school system, especially here in Alberta and BC.
Trying to?
Well, yeah, they're trying to.
They're in there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Not as bad as other places.
But first, let's do a bit of chit-chat. Well, guys, another school shooting, another week, another school shooting in in the U.S.
Yeah.
This is the 6th in 2018. They're having like one a week now. A school shooting, a mass school shooting, one a week.
That's pretty bad when you can say, what day of the week is it?
Yeah,
it must be Tuesday. There was a school shoot. What day did this one happen on?
It happened actually on Valentine's Day.
On Valentine's Day?
Which was Wednesday. The suspect is
Wednesday.
Nicholas Cruz. He's a 19-year-old young man. He was a student that was expelled, and he came back to the school. He killed 3 people outside, and then he entered the school and pulled a fire alarm. And as people were leaving,
oh my god,
they started shooting and killed 12 more.
So, I'm just jumping here for a second. So, did they confirm that he was the one that pulled the fire alarm?
I don't know at this point.
Okay,
I haven't seen that.
Because I knew the fire alarm was pulled. I just didn't know if they had confirmed that he did it or not.
So 17 have died in total. He was apprehended, and this was at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School.
This is sad.
This is sad, and it's not the first. And I don't know what to say about something like this, because it's like what is it going to take? What is it going to take for them to understand?
All those families now have lost their child. I mean,
it's very hard for us to understand as Canadians, because I think there's something wrong in the mentality of the American population as a whole. And actually, we're doing a top 10 a bit later on, and we'll explain some of it a bit further, because there are some things that are very interesting about Americans. But, I find it difficult to understand that when you talk to Americans, they seem to think that under every rock and behind every nook, there's a bad guy waiting to shoot you. And
it's because everyone has a gun.
Yeah, and I had a friend that tell me on social media, if they prefer their guns over their children, fuck them. And it's almost hard to disagree with that.
It is. I was reading an article last night. It was written by an American. You could tell the bias was there. But what China thinks of the United States. Now, I'm not saying that China's any, and I apologize to any Chinese people listening. China's not a great country. They've got human rights issues. They have pollution issues. They have problems.
Yeah.
However, with over almost 1.5 billion people living in China, they do not have the gun violence the United States has with 350 million people.
And this it's another thing that bothers me. It seems the Americans are so America-centric. They can't seem to figure out that other countries around the world have solved this issue.
They figured it out. We figured it out. We figured out that if you control the guns and you make it harder for people to get the guns, it doesn't mean Canada has more guns per capita than the United States does. Yes. We actually have more guns per person.
It's a really gun-loving country here.
But we have tighter controls on how you get those guns. So not any yahoo can... How does a 19-year-old run around with guns?
With an AR-15.
With an AR-15. Yeah. And what's he doing with an AR? That's an assault weapon.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. That is an urban assault weapon.
Well, it's the civilian equivalent of the M16. It absolutely is.
It is.
You're an ex-military
assault.
guy. You know
it's
exactly
an urban
what it is.
assault weapon, and nobody's going to tell me any different on that. It's using the same round. It's capable of killing.
Yeah, you're not hunting deer with this. You know, it's what it's.
Well,
what
even
it's
if you were hunting deer, I mean, you want to use a 30-30 or any rifle.
But
it is dangerous in the hands of somebody who wants to hurt people.
Yeah, I was listening to a conservative media outlet the other day there, and they had the ex-Vice President Biden on, and he was telling, if people are concerned, because it's a big thing in the States, they're always concerned that somebody's going to break into their house and rob them.
Yeah,
and mug
but
them.
if you have a gun, the person can get the gun.
Yeah, well, the Vice President said all you need for a situation like that, if you really think it's a possibility, which I think I'd love to look at the stats because I think it's probably more rare than people think it is, that a shotgun is good enough. And the response from the right-wingers was, okay, so you shoot the first 2 armed robbers, what about the after?
Wait.
Well, do you think there's like roving gangs of armed robbers coming at you here?
It's not the Purge.
Exactly. You think these are like zombies coming at you?
A shotgun... I'm sorry, why would you use something? That is definitely a killing weapon, unless you're talking like a 16 gauge or...
But
if you got a 12 gauge shotgun and you're popping somebody at a close range, you're going to cut them in half.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say, for example, there is a couple of guys coming and trying to rob your house in a situation here, and they confront you, and you have a shotgun, and a shot goes off, not even in their general direction. What do you think these guys are going to do? Pull out all their guns and shoot you dead and keep robbing the place? No, they're going to bolt out of there. That's how it works, right? These people... Has
anybody here ever heard a gunshot inside a building?
Oh, it's loud. It's loud.
I've heard one outside, and it's ridiculously loud.
A 12-gauge shotgun inside... I can't imagine. I wouldn't even want it with ear defenders on.
Yeah.
Inside a building.
It's... the Americans need to understand that you cannot cowboy your way out of a gun problem. Right? More guns is not going to make them safer. It's going to make things worse. Bullets are going to start
especially
flying.
when you realize if you are having a home robbery,
yes,
and your gun is immediately available to you, that means it's loaded.
Mm-hmm.
It's right beside you, and if it's always there, it's going to be available to your children.
Yes.
If you have a cat, it might knock it over. Like if it's so readily available that you can get it in a stressful situation when people are robbing your house, then it is not secured. It is not...
And we know how well that's working for the Americans.
Exactly.
There was the one guy who was driving his vehicle with a holstered weapon. The weapon had a round chambered.
Oh my gosh.
And it was cocked.
Yeah.
That's smart.
He supposedly had the safety on. However, he had a round chambered with a cocked weapon in the holster, and I think he ended up bleeding out in the truck because it shot him in the leg, and basically he bled out.
It seems that
there was
a
safety instructor, a weapons safety instructor down in the States, and I laugh at this one all the time, teaching people how to clean their firearms, because that's part of the course. Yeah. Is when you're taking your firearms safety. And he shot himself in the foot teaching people how to clean the firearm. Yeah. I'm sorry, but having loaded firearms around is a recipe for disaster when you have untrained civilians who are using, and even the police down in the States have made fatal errors with their weapons.
And the average civilian seems to think they're all going to be Rambos all of a sudden.
Well, and the thing is, I find a lot of people, they watch movies and media and think that that's how a gun works.
Yes.
Not realizing that media doesn't accurately portray what a gun is like. Yeah. They don't show how loud
until
they are.
Until you're on the range firing a weapon, and remember, on a range firing a weapon, that's a controlled circumstance.
Oh, absolutely.
You're walking onto that range directing that weapon downrange at a target, and you have all the time in the world to make the decision to squeeze the trigger. Mm-hmm. You have all the time in the world to aim. If somebody's breaking into your house, you're not going to have that time. No. You're going to be in a panic, and I can guarantee what's going to happen with most people. They're going to fumble, drop the gun, probably shoot themselves in the act. Or they're going to kill somebody and then find out it was either a friend who was checking in on them, or one of their own kids, or a neighbor who was drunk and was coming home and went into the wrong house. Something. And they're going to find out it was an unjustified killing.
Fear-mongering has become an industry in the States. And the number one culprit for this, which nobody's talking about, especially in the U.S., is their media. I mean, you just watch local news in the U.S., which is outrageously horrible reporting, by the way. And it's like, tonight we'll tell you how to change your spare tire on the side of the road without getting raped. News at 11. Well, it's that stupid. It's fear-mongering all the time.
An example you can look at is a couple years ago when the Ebola outbreak was happening in Africa. And you look at Britain and their news coverage of it, and they were like, yeah, don't worry about it, guys. If you have these symptoms, go to the hospital. We'll help you. In America, there's one case, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're all going to die.
It's the end of the world.
It's become an industry, and the average American is swayed by that, and they don't understand this. To our American listeners that can listen to this show, I would say, if you're going to get some news, take an outside source from the United States. Go to the BBC, go to the CBC. You'll see there's a world of difference between American news and news outlets outside the country.
On that, though, I've seen a couple of American news stories in recent days where it was about people who were being robbed or foiled a robbery and then basically befriended the criminal and turned them around, actually helped them and said, there's something going wrong here. There was no gunplay involved. There was they stopped robbery and then they turned around and took the burglar out for a burger or a coffee.
Because most people that are robbing you, especially if you're not in like a $20 million mansion, like if you're just in like a suburban house,
they probably need whatever they're stealing.
It's poverty. It's a poverty issue,
and they're doing it because they're desperate, not because they're overly malicious and wanting to hurt you. So
when you see these stories, I wonder if maybe those news agencies are trying to set people up to say, "Hey, wait a minute! Sometimes the burglar or the crook isn't what you think they are."
It sells. That's the thing. It sells,
but they're not what they think they are. And maybe you can actually hold out the olive branch or hold out the hand and shake and make that crime stop.
And you have to remember,
you don't need a gun.
Since Ronald Reagan, the American news, there was a law that said, it had to be truthful and verified and all that. They don't have that anymore. American news does not, by law, have to actually be truthful. It just has to sell.
Fake news.
And what exactly? And what sells the most? Crime, horror,
violence.
Fear.
Yep,
exactly.
Fear
Anyway,
and violence.
Moving on. Do you guys hear? There's an Oregon woman. She's the first person to have a new eyeworm parasite.
Oh, what?
Oh, I read about this.
Apparently, it's a parasite that was only found in cattle, and it's spread by flies that feed on eyeball lubrication. Apparently, the CDC found there was 14 eyeworms in this woman, and now it's, the species called Caesalia. Well, yeah, they removed them.
Okay.
I guess they have to make a cut and pull them out.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh, I wonder if it's on YouTube.
No.
Oh, it probably is.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to go watch it.
Go watch it on your phone.
There's plenty of these kind of videos.
Oh, no. I watch a lot of them.
Yeah.
I'm really weird.
So the species is Caesalia gulosa, and now is officially the third species of eyeworm for humans.
Ew.
Ooh.
Hey, at least it's not a bot fly.
Well, yeah, it's in the same category, isn't it?
I think a bot fly in your eye, that would be the end of your eye.
Oh my gosh. Guys, don't Google that. It's gross.
Did you, I guess, following the Olympics?
No.
Well, last I checked.
What? There's Olympics on?
Yeah.
Last I checked, Canada had 4 gold, 5 silver, and 4 bronze for a total of 13 medals. We're actually third overall behind Norway and Germany.
I'll be the first to offer any of those medal winners. Well, actually, any of the participants at all. I'll buy you a coffee if you come through Abbotsford. Look me up.
Oh, jumping in here. Did you guys see that they had the it's a gold hockey stick? That
golden hockey stick.
No, but it's cool.
Do you know the legend behind the golden hockey stick?
I just heard about it. Okay, do you know the legend? Or
we don't have time for that. Continue the story.
We don't have time for that.
Oh, okay. But it's cool because they had it in Vancouver, and it counts how many, like, you tap it on the ground, and it has a counter in it. So it counts how many people tap it. And they had it, I think, there for a couple days. And there was like over 20,000 people.
Wow.
That tapped it. And then today it's going up to Whistler. And then they're bringing it to Pyongyang.
Oh, really?
To the Olympics.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. February 9th, there was a jury, an all-white jury, right here in Canada, that found Gerard Stanley, 56, not guilty of second-degree murder of Colton Bushty, 22, native fellow, happened in Saskatchewan. Yeah. The kid was killed when he and 4 of his other friends drove onto Stanley's property, rural property, near Bigger, Saskatchewan. Stanley basically says that, Stanley says it was an accidental discharge of his weapon. and this happened in August 2016. People are very divided about this. They're actually even opposing fundraisers, and they've raised about $200,000. The question is, at this point, would a First Nation jury ruled otherwise on this?
We weren't party to the case. We don't know any of the evidence. I've heard the stories, and based on the stories, the accidental discharge of the weapon killing Mr. Bushi is quite plausible.
Okay.
It is quite plausible.
Let me add a few things here. Saskatchewan has a history of the KKK that's been there since 1926. The RCMP failed to inform the mother of when the accused would appear in court. The victim was shot in a car. The RCMP didn't cover the car. And when it rained, it washed the blood away, the footprints and everything. The blood splatter expert couldn't examine the car because of this.
Yeah.
It makes it very
sounds
suspicious.
like it's been botched.
Well, yeah, either botched. Yeah, exactly.
No, when I say botched, I mean either intentionally or unintentionally. It was botched.
That's what people are arguing.
Dealing with the evidence properly. Like, come on, guys.
This is like.
I feel like that should
why
be
wouldn't you cover? Why don't you put a tarp over the car at least or something?
Like I say, the only thing that I believed in the entire story that I've read so far was I thought I put 2 rounds in the weapon. I fired 2 rounds, and then I dry clicked. Okay? He dry clicked. So in other words, there's no more ammunition in the weapon. Nothing's... And he was holding the gun when he went over to Bushi in the car. And the gun then went off. Well, it turns out there was a 3rd round in the gun, and the 3rd round was a misfire. And it was basically a ticking time bomb. He just happened to be holding the gun in the wrong position and shot the guy in the head. That is very plausible. And again, what is this guy doing with a handgun? Okay, first off, we're not allowed to use handguns in Canada. So for him to be walking around with a handgun, right away, the red flags start going up.
Yeah.
Okay. The other side of it, though, is what was Bushi and his friends doing in the car? Because the story was that they crashed their vehicle. Then they went to try and steal a vehicle, and somehow they ended up on his property with a car with a flat tire. Well, there's something missing here. I'm missing a whole part of the story. So there's a whole bunch of things that are wrong with this whole case. And yeah, I agree with the natives. They are his family is up in arms right now because how did this happen, and how did this guy get acquitted? Yeah. Like, how did he get acquitted?
And
because there's something wrong here.
At least manslaughter. Like, you did kill someone.
He killed someone, and he should be paying a price for killing someone. Whether it was accidental or not, well, if it was accidental, he was using an illegal weapon.
It's still your fault.
And pointing it in their direction.
You know what I mean? You're right. Manslaughter, he should be spending some time behind bars. And it's a sad case. It's a very sad case that another person... No matter what the circumstances, that person's dead now, and there's no way to bring that person back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of sad in that sense.
You know, at the end of everything, with all that crazy, like, you know, trying to fill in these missing puzzle pieces, that is the end.
That is the end.
There is a life lost, and there is no way.
Mr. Bushi is dead
to bring that back.
There's no way to bring him back.
Exactly. Right? Here's a funny story. You guys hear there's some Texas researchers in a chopper were flying low to tag some elks? And an elk, they threw a net on one of the elks, and the elk jumped so high, it jumped like 10 feet plus, and it crashed into the rotor of the helicopter.
No. Oh my gosh, did it die?
Well, the elk is dead.
And the helicopter crashed.
The helicopter crash.
Go elk.
The researchers are okay, thank goodness.
But why were they throwing a net on a live elk that wasn't tranked?
Well, I guess instead of tranquilizing.
They throw the net down to immobilize
the elk.
Slow
it down, okay.
Then tranquilize it.
I got you.
And then they tranquilize it, and then they tag it. And then when it wakes up from the tranquilizer, of course, it's released.
Yeah.
I just feel like if this large animal is running,
you think you'd want to be a little higher.
You think?
Not only that, and I feel like a net is just like.
No, the net's actually really good because what it does is it slows them down. It's not going to trip them up or anything. It's going to slow them down.
It's designed in a way that it's okay.
Yeah, basically.
These aren't just random people. These are people who have
these are actually scientists.
Well, I wasn't expecting it to just be random people.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's another funny animal story. Did you guys hear that scientists apparently have taught a killer whale to say hello?
Really?
This is Wiki, the 14-year-old in France, a killer whale in France, at SeaWorld, and scientists are shocked by this because it demonstrates that culture can be transmitted. Now, it's been well known.
Mimicry?
Yes. But because if you're mimicking, therefore you can transmit patterns and things they're doing. Orcas have been known for a long time.
I don't know if I qualify that as culture. Well, you're definitely able to teach language.
Yeah, but if think of a dialect.
Right,
a dialect is part of culture.
I can teach my dog to listen to me.
Yes.
And the dog can learn about 14 to 20 words.
Well, yes,
right?
But it's learning your culture, right? In a way.
Oh no, it's learning the words of a language.
Yeah. Well, orcas have different dialects and accents, and they
accents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Between different species.
In their calls.
Different not
Very
species,
cool.
different families.
Yeah.
So this is obviously It's a French killer whale. And it's got a French accent.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. I am the killer whale.
It's really interesting because this is one issue that they've run into when they when they capture orcas from the wild from different pods and try to mix them in the same tank. They can't communicate with each other.
It's almost like they're speaking a different language or a different dialect.
Yeah.
I have get a little clip here. Let's listen to what the whale says.
Yes.
Hello.
That was it.
That is so cute.
It's quite adorable.
Absolutely.
Now the question is, does it know when to use it?
Well, we don't know yet, but these cetaceans are obviously very smart too.
Yeah.
Oh, he probably does know when to use it.
Yeah, because that would
he
be...
He witnesses it enough with his trainers, right?
That would be the difference between like what a parrot can do.
It's kind of an interesting thing
understanding
because, we say hello, and of course we're using our teeth, our tongue, and our lips. They don't have the same. They have a tongue, they have teeth, but they don't have lips like we do. Mm-hmm. They certainly can, do an O sound or a or something like that.
I think the only thing they could make would be a T sound.
Yeah. So
instead of the P.
So they're doing something. What they hear, and they're doing something as they can reproduce as closely as faithfully as possible. That's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. And last but certainly not least, did you guys hear that the federal government has decided to help the press? They decided that through the Canada Periodical Fund, they're going to give some. They're going to start subsidizing some of the press.
Oh my gosh, that is such a good idea. It
is good news. This annual fund is actually there to usually. It helps magazines and nonprofit, but now they're going to expand it, and you're going to use this fund to help some of the local. Papers like the Toronto Star and all these big papers to adapt to a digital age, and reports are talking about $75 million annually.
Wow!
Of course, the Conservatives are up in arms about this right away, but
well, because one of the biggest issues facing the journalist industry right now is that there's so many cuts that people are having to do. People aren't able to do good journalism anymore because they don't have the time because they have to pump out like 10 stories in an hour.
Yeah, and they're cutting back on reporters,
and that's a huge reason why you get cross media. You get one story that is like the same across everything because people just they've done this story. Let's just read their story. Let's basically rewrite it in our own words. Yeah.
All right, thanks guys for this. So moving on, we'll do our top. Nancy's not here this week, so I'm gonna have to do the top 10.
You got the top 10?
I've got the top 10.
What have you got for a top 10?
Well, actually, instead of going with Nancy's top 10, sorry Nancy, but in the events that happened this week in Florida, especially in the States, here are the top 10 bizarre things the U.S. believes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
I was kind of hoping this was the direction you were going.
I'm sorry,
when you were
all
earlier.
American listeners. We're about to ridicule you guys.
This is. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm sorry to our American listeners. This is tough love.
We do actually love our American listeners.
We do, but this is what
your country's a bit sketchy, but you guys are awesome.
Yeah. This is something that we find as outsiders really bizarre. Number 10. Did you know that 7% of all Americans, and we've talked about this before, believes that chocolate milk comes from brown cows?
Wow.
What?
Yes.
What do you mean? It doesn't?
This is a study that was actually done by the dairy industry in 2017. Now, 7% of the American population, that's 16.4 million Americans. That's twice the city of New York.
Wow.
And in that same study, 20% of Americans don't know that hamburgers actually comes from cows.
Do you want to know what's funny, though? Probably all those people live in cities.
It's quite possible.
Because when you think about
on the farm, if you don't know this on the farm, you're...
Exactly. It's probably the people who grew up in cities.
What did you say now? 20% of Americans don't know hamburger comes from beef?
Wait,
right.
20%?
20%. 1 in 5.
Don't you know hamburger comes from McDonald's?
Exactly.
That's
comes from a box of frozen burgers.
Just like milk comes from the store.
That's an insanely large number.
Yeah, they also don't know what farm animals eat.
Grass?
Actually, nowadays, most of us aren't sure what farm animals eat anymore.
Yeah. Well, it changes at our farm periodically.
Number 9, and this I think explains a lot about what their gun problems in the States. Americans believe they are systematically harassed by groups of people for no reason. There's a term for this. It's called gang stalking.
Wait, I don't even understand what that means.
I know what gang stalking is, and yes, that actually is a thing.
There's an unknown number, but a significant number of Americans that suffer from this type of paranoia. It's a phenomenon that spiked especially after 9/11 and feeds on conspiracy.
Wait,
Americans have a tendency to believe that people are out there to get them.
I don't get it.
Okay,
like walking down the street, you think like, oh my gosh, everyone...
No, I'll run you a scenario
okay.
because I know someone this is happening to now.
Oh, that sucks.
Pick a target. Now, I talk to you because you work in the same area as the target. I talk to you because I know that you do deliveries to the target area. And everybody keeps an eye on Joe Blow. And every time Joe Blow turns around, there's somebody watching him.
So it's just paranoia.
Joe Blow's walking down... Well, it turns into total paranoia. Joe Blow's walking through the aisle at Canadian Tire. And all of a sudden, he sees the same person who came in the door with him, like followed him in, drove into the parking lot, followed him in, and he's walking down a random aisle, and he looks over, and this guy's looking at him, and then looks down at the package that he's holding in his hand.
This explains very well, like the Red Scare of the 50s, the jihadist thing of after 9/11, or the immigration problems they have with Mexicans and all that. They think people are out there to get them. And explains also the gun, why they hold on to the gun so tightly, because if you're the average American that thinks everybody's out there to get them.
How often is this...
You don't know.
We don't
even know if it's real. You don't know if it's real. You don't know if it's not. It could just be paranoia, or it could be something else. Now, the person that I was talking to, it was more than paranoia because they were able to witness it. It was somebody that they knew who was going through it, and then they went with the person, and they were able to witness the events and go, "Wow."
Okay.
So
number 8, 25%, and that's 1/4. Of all Americans believe God influences the Super Bowl.
What?
Yes. And they don't just pray; they also think that actually God sways the game in their favor.
Well, yeah, that's right. We all know that God's a Patriots fan.
Yeah. He lost last time, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, he can't win them all. Satan had a hand in there.
Number 7. 12 million Americans believe lizard people secretly run the U.S. and the world. This was also
and they all watch Alex Jones.
Yeah, this was all popularized by David Icke in his book. This is 4% of the population. This is not insignificant.
Lizard people exist.
Yes. Pew Research said that it's the same. It's more than the population of Jews in the U.S. and more than the population of Muslims and Buddhists and all that combined.
Wow.
Reptilians out there.
Wow.
Exactly. Number 6. Many Americans believe HTML, the computer term HTML, is actually an STD.
What?
Yes. This is 11% of 18 and over, and very prominent in the not tech-savvy population, obviously. They also believe that MP3 was a Star Wars droid. 18% believe Blu-ray is a sea creature.
Oh my god.
And 12% said USB, as opposed to USA, was a forgotten country in Europe.
Is this all like 80-year-old people in the States?
Could be.
Well, it's just random surveys, right?
Yeah.
So,
Number 5. As many Americans believe in Bigfoot as in the Big Bang Theory.
That is depressing.
In 2014, Chapman University survey, in that survey, 20% believe in fortune tellers. 30% believe Bigfoot is the same percentage as the Big Bang. 50% think that childhood vaccines are safe, which means the other 50% think they're not safe. 45% believe Satan causes most harm in the world. And 40% believe in evolution, as opposed to 60% that don't. And 25% believe the sun revolves around the earth.
What?
I'm sorry, what?
What?
25% of the American population believes the sun revolves around the earth.
Okay, that scares me.
Okay.
But then again, they believe in Bigfoot too, so...
Well, you know what? I'd rather believe in Bigfoot at that point. There's a possibility with Bigfoot at least.
Wow.
Number 4. 50% of Americans believe major news are making up stuff about Donald Trump. This is from a survey from Politico in 2017. Yeah, 76% of Republicans believe that, and 11% of Democrats. And 28% of all Americans wish the government could censor the news.
That is terrifying.
That is terrifying.
That is terrifying. It's like people look at a history book, look at fascist nations, look at what happens when authoritarians take over. The first thing they go for is the news.
And 21% are unsure.
Oh my gosh.
Number 3. Many Americans believe dinosaurs and humans coexisted.
Can I just...
The Flintstones was a documentary.
No, guys, I used to believe that too.
No.
I was one of those people.
They're talking about 41% of all Americans. Thank you, creationism.
Yeah, pretty much. I was one of those people, and then I'm not anymore.
Number 2. Half of the American population believes global warming will harm America, but not them personally.
Seriously?
I know. This is impressive mental gymnastics. I don't know how you figure that out.
Do Americans not understand how connected the globe is?
Exactly.
Like not even just on an economic level, but on a ecological level. Like if the crops in Florida and California are affected, then you aren't going to be getting your food.
It's almost like they think that it's only going to affect the very poor, but since I've got a job, it's not going to affect me, kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's
that's weird.
It's a weird mental gymnastic. And number 1, barely any American knows anything about their own constitution. I can understand that.
You know what? That's sad, because the American Constitution is one of the greatest documents ever written.
Yes. Now, 1/3 of them couldn't name a right protected by the First Amendment.
The right to speak? Free speech?
Free speech. 1/3 of them couldn't name any branch of government, whether executive, legislative, or judicial. And I'm a Canadian, guys, so imagine this. I know this, and I'm a Canadian. I'm not even an American.
To be fair, you're reading off a paper.
Yeah, but I don't have it written here. I don't have it written here.
We were taught this.
Yeah.
This is basic.
Okay, just for American listeners, Canadians in school are taught about America.
Well,
to a point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My twin
Canadian
sister.
history's not that great.
My twin sister in grade 10 learned about the Civil War in America.
1/3 didn't recognize the Bill of Rights.
Seriously?
Wow.
10% had no idea why it was drafted in the first place. Why would you draft the Bill of Rights? No idea. Maybe to give you rights,
Sad.
In the 1950s, this is a funny little story. In the 1950s, there was a reporter that walked around with the Declaration of Independence on a clipboard and told people there was a petition.
Oh my god.
Of 111 people that he asked to sign, one person recognized what it was and signed it. 20 accused him of being a communist, and one person even said it was the Russian Declaration of Independence. And then you wonder why America is in the mess it's in today.
Yep. They're obviously not teaching the right things in school, because one of the first things that children should be learning once they're of an appropriate age is what that Constitution means. You can teach all about what's in the Constitution, but what it means, because there's a whole lot of meaning there. What their Bill of Rights is, what their, how the country came to be. And they just don't know it. It's scary.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. That
I've heard Americans say, the Constitution's written in stone. Yeah, that's why we have a First Amendment, a Second Amendment.
Yeah.
It's written in stone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for this, guys. But it's time for a segment that we always love called...
Wait, do I have to start it?
Hold on.
I forget what starts. Or are you just really slow?
Just takes time to load.
Oh.
Another brilliant moment.
I love this song.
Brought to you by Religion. Okay.
We're such professionals.
In today's not all shocking episode of Christian pastors blaming women for their own bodies and for sexual abuse, extremist Kevin Swanson, remember that guy? The guy that sounds like a ready-to-go meal? Had his moment. According to Swanson, Larry Nasser, you guys have followed this guy?
Yeah.
This is the coach that was essentially touching a lot of young girls.
He was abusing. He was an Olympic doctor.
Yeah.
And he, for it was like 30 years, has been abusing the girls and women that he's been working with.
He was convicted of sexually assaulting underage girls, but Swanson thinks that he did so because gymnastics contained, quote, a fair amount of immodesty.
What?
Yeah, I guess those 8-year-olds should just drop with their sexy shoulders.
I've got an axe. I've got an axe. Take care of this guy real fine.
It's really interesting because in his trial, one of the fathers of the girls he abused actually tried to attack him.
Yes.
Well, no.
I know,
I'm
right?
sorry. I'm going to say this, Kevin. I apologize for the profanity, but no shit, Sherlock.
It was really nice though, because the judge was like, "Yeah, no, I understand why you did it.
Yeah,
I'll let you off. You don't have to."
Let's get him restrained.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quote, there is an infatuation with the body and, of course, the sexual aspects of the body as well.
Not of an 8-year-old girl.
Exactly. Some sports encourage immodesty, revealing large portions of the body, and this happens in some sports. These are risky sports. Here they are. One of those risky sports, gymnastics and swimming. These are the sports which have an added risk, he says.
Oh my god, you can see legs.
I know, that's awful. So Swanson opposed the idea that men are just acting according to their masculine nature. It's female temptation that's to blame. Of course, blame the victim. Quote, do you really want your daughters involved in a sport that involves a fair amount of immodesty in which red-blooded American males coaches are interacting with these girls?
That right there is
First of
the
all,
problem.
ew.
Yeah, ew, because that coach is there for the mechanics of the gymnastics. They're trying to teach these girls how to move their bodies to not hurt themselves and to form the
flips and
to form the actual gymnastics. They're not there to have sex with the girls, and you know what? The axe that I was discussing was for chopping his hands off, and then we could parade him in front of those girls to say, this is what happens to people who abuse you.
You just want to chop off the hand?
Chop off another part.
Well, we can chop off another part too, but I mean, the hands are good because I'm assuming that's what he was using to...
Okay, here's another story. This is a local one. An Ontario PC leadership candidate, Doug Ford.
Oh, I heard about
Remember
this.
Rob Ford? Remember the mayor of Toronto, Rob Ford, idiot Rob Ford, eventually died. His brother, Doug Ford, recently accepted endorsement from a pair of controversial pastors with a history of preaching hate. This is Charles McVitie and Paul Melnichuk, two pastors with a well-documented track record of promoting homophobia and anti-Semitism, are singling Ford's praise as he works to lock down the support of Ontario's social conservative fringe. Well, isn't that great?
Doug Ford.
Yeah.
Wasn't he the one who did damage control for Rob?
Yes, he was.
He did a lot of damage control for the train wreck.
That must have been a lot of damage control.
Oh man! Well, every time Rob Ford turned around, it was a new story in the news. The Americans were actually enjoying it. It was like,
finally.
wow, look at this Canadian politician. He's awesome, right?
We found one. We finally found one.
Yeah, McVitie, for example, is a former televangelist deemed too extreme for the Christian TV station CBS.
Seriously?
Yes. In 2010, management yanked McVitie off the air following complaints that he was broadcasting discriminatory comments. According to a Canadian Broadcasting Standard Council ruling, McVitie violated broadcasting codes by presenting distorted facts and abusive comments about homosexual as specifically comments that suggested that homosexuals prey on children.
That's so
isn't that
gross.
great to have these kind of people in your corner when you're conservative? It's so great. So Ontario, keep an eye on that. All right, moving on. This story. One of the highest-ranking officials in the Catholic Church stated that he would, quote, rather go to prison
I heard this.
than report pedophilia to the police.
I had heard about this as well.
This is Australia's most powerful clergy, Archbishop of Melbourne, Dennis Hart, says that he's prepared to be jailed for failing to report child sex abuse by pedophile priest.
That, like, how can you be actively supporting the Catholic Church when that is the people leading the church?
Well, this guy, in the Catholic Church, the sacrament of confession is almost, they take it almost like lawyer-client privilege.
But if
I understand that. That makes it rather difficult. If that's what he's saying, that he won't take a confessional and report it to the police, then I almost have to agree with him there. There are certain things that are protected. Somebody comes to a priest and gives confession, then That's a protected thing. It's like going to your lawyer and saying, hey, this is what I did. What do I do now?
I understand that, but there needs to be a line drawn, right? If the guy comes in the confessional and starts admitting that he's been killing people left, right, and center, I'm sorry. You know, this is one of those things that you need to, even anonymously, go to the cops and say something about it.
Yeah.
And attacking children is the same thing.
If you want to say anyone,
if the guy says, I've been cheating on my wife and I stole money from the company, and you don't want to reveal that because it's a confession, fine, I understand that. But when other people are actually in danger, you know what?
Yeah.
Put your sacrament aside.
And also, is this specifically talking about other clergy members abusing children?
That's what he was talking about.
It's not just like people in your congregation. It's other clergy members.
But all the clergy members also go through confession as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to.
It's really interesting because I have a sister who goes to a Catholic church, and she doesn't like Disney because she thinks Disney is like a pedophile ring. And then I'm just like, you go to a Catholic church. I don't understand.
The irony is so thick.
Yes,
I know.
But Disney does it for money. The Catholic Church does it for God.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it is money too. The Catholic Church is not poor. So he made the shocking statement in response to the Australian Royal Commission into institutional response to child sexual abuse, saying there should be no excuse, protecting nor privilege for clergy who fail to alert police of abuse.
Well, that's a fair statement.
Hart insisted that the sexual abuse was, quote, a spiritual encounter with God through the priest and was of a higher order than criminal law. His God comes before criminal law.
Can people in Australia listen to that and just, okay, we're going to keep a very close eye on this man?
Yeah.
Like,
maybe they should read their Bible.
Let's just, have a police officer constantly tailing him.
God's law is higher than man's law.
Oh, wait a minute, though.
And this is how...
In the Bible, it says...
In the Bible, Jesus actually said...
Obey
the law. Not just obey God. He said obey the laws.
But obey the laws of the land.
Well, the laws of the land would say that pedophilia is wrong, right?
So, as the law currently stands, clergy are not legally obliged to report crimes to the police, and disciplinary proceedings for criminal activity by members of the Catholic Church are handled internally by canon law, which operates independently of the regular law procedure. So right now, that's the law in Australia. So following an investigation by the Commission, officials believe that the Catholic Church is using, quote, confessional confidentiality as a cover for not reporting child sex abuse to the authorities. Yeah.
Okay, fair ball.
Yeah.
So how many priests do you figure they have chained up in the bowels of the Vatican for pedophilia?
If they've chained them up.
They don't chain him up. They give him. They move him around.
They chain the children up. Oh my gosh.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right. What a weird world we're living in. Well, thank you so much, guys, for this. So, let's take a break right now, and when we come back, we'll be with our old friend Luke Fevin. So, stay with us.
If your skepticism is socially conscious and doesn't take itself too seriously, you might like Life, the Universe, and Everything Else.
Great comfort, his big stumper was literally, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
A lot of the interviews took place in front of a building that said liberal arts. I'm guessing that they're not all science majors.
Life, the Universe, and Everything Else. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else. I don't know, Zoom? Is that still a thing?
A Canadian, a New Yorker, and a Southern belle walked into a podcast, and all hell broke loose. Seriously, though, what happens when we three ladies get together? Well, definitely a lot of talking. And accents. Funny accents. Well, I don't have an accent, but my co-hosts sure do. We mix North, South, and the Great White North together for 2 hours of pure secular discussion. Nothing is off limits. From goofy religions like Scientology, woo like ghost hunting and alternative medicine, to hardcore history, hermeneutics, sex, and science. We cover it all. What the heck is a hermeneutic? Well, it's not a guy named Herman who sings falsetto, that's for sure. Join Beth, Ashley, and myself, Deborah, every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and we take you beyond the trailer park and bring the conversation to life. Join us live on YouTube and participate in the conversation via the Q&A system, or catch us later on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, and Nobex. Visit www.beyondthetrailerpark.com for links to the show and our upcoming schedule. Bring your wine and sweet tea and settle in for fun facts and free thinking. We happily wear the explicit tag, though, so make sure to wash out your mouth with something tasty before listening. That's live at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Come give us a like and a share, no matter what type of accent you have.
Okay, just think about the Muslims at this moment who are blowing themselves up, convinced that they are agents of God's will. There is absolutely nothing that Dr. Craig can say against their behavior in moral terms, apart from his own faith-based claim that they're praying to the wrong God. If they had the right God, what they were doing would be good on divine command theory. Now, I'm obviously not saying that Dr. Craig or all religious people are psychopaths and psychotics, but this to me is the true horror of religion. It allows perfectly decent and sane people to believe by the billions what only lunatics could believe on their own. Okay, if you wake up tomorrow morning thinking that saying a few Latin words over your pancakes is going to turn them into the body of Elvis Presley, okay, you have lost your mind. Okay. But if you think more or less the same thing about a cracker and the body of Jesus, you're just a Catholic.
All right, so joining us on the line is our old friend Luke Fevin. He's a snappy dresser and a snazzy dancer. Luke, thank you for coming back once again and Left of the Valley.
Good to be in the valley.
Luke, last year in November, actually, we did a show with you and we started going on the subject of religion inserting itself into the school system and all that, and we could only do so much on that show, so you're back today to finish off and round off more of this. But for our listeners that may not have caught us, would you be so kind of maybe give us a brief description as to who Luke Fevin is?
Yeah, Luke Fevin is a superhero that lives in a small town just outside Edmonton. I'm a dad of three young kids here in Alberta, and something happened 7 years ago where they were forcing one of my kids to pray in a public school, and so we had a little bit of an awakening over that and religion in school, and since then. I have gone on to co-found a group out here called APupil, APUPIL. You can find us on Facebook.
Yes.
Rather cleverly called Albertan Parents for Unbiased Public Inclusive Learning, a name that was supposed to be a placeholder 7 years ago, and we've never changed it. And we within APupil deal with basically secular issues almost always within the education system. And so that has been either the favoritism of or actually the compelling rendition of the Lord's Prayer every morning in public schools. It has been that old chestnut of giving out Gideon Bibles in public schools. It's the fact that we have evangelical religious organizations like the Pregnancy Care Center that here in Alberta actually provide sex education in a number of our public schools, but from a evangelical Christian, if you've had sex before you're married, you're dirty and going to hell.
Oh my gosh.
Which is obviously not great. And my goodness, there's a whole bunch of issues where religion has crept into not only our school system but our public school system. But of course, today we are going to talk about the absolute madness that is the education system here in Alberta. Happens in a couple of other provinces as well. And so I'm gonna set it up like this, if I may. So, Luke, how does Alberta run its education system? Well, funny you should ask.
He's doing my job now.
This is what it looks like. So we have two publicly funded state-run school systems here in Alberta. One for Catholics and one for everybody else.
That's so weird.
They do that in Ontario too.
Isn't that completely mad? Like if you come from Alberta and you say that, people go, yeah. Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Are Catholics that much of the population in Alberta?
Well, now, of course, now we're getting off into a completely different conversation. The number of Catholics here is it's about 27-28%, I think, in the last census that was done 10 years ago. And that number is slowly declining, but not as fast as Anglicanism. Now, but of course, what is a Catholic? Because, of that 28%, there was a study done in 2012 that said fully 1/3, 33% of people that called themselves Catholic didn't believe in a god. That was here in Alberta, and of course, they tend to be fairly progressive on taking the pill and using condoms, and fish on Fridays, and gay marriage is okay, and so. There are Catholics, and then there are proper Catholics.
Cafeteria Catholics.
There's not an awful lot of proper Catholics left, I don't think.
Hey, Luke, I got to interrupt here. Do you ever hear the joke about this imam and this rabbi that goes to the Catholic priest, and they say, we've been having a problem with squirrels at our mosque and our synagogue, but you right here in your church, you don't seem to have any problems with the squirrel. What's your secret? And the Catholic priest told the imam and the rabbi, says, well, it's quite simple. We just baptize him and make him Catholics, and they only show up for Easter and Christmas.
So
that's awesome.
Luke, question for you.
Yes.
Do they have to be Catholic to go to the Catholic schools?
Ooh, good question.
Well, because I know in Ontario they don't. Anyone can go to the Catholic schools. So
here's the answer. If they have enough money, i.e. they've got enough students, then you need to be Catholic. If they don't have enough students and they have lots of room to take more students and take money, take public money, then you don't have to be Catholic.
Yes.
And of course, we can talk about discrimination in hiring of teachers as well, because the same thing happens with teachers, which is completely mad. It's a slight segue. But we know many teachers that have said to us when they were at college and when they were at university, they were actually advised if they didn't have a faith to pop into the local Catholic dispensary or however it is they dispense Catholicness, and actually get into the whole get jiggy with Catholicness. So that they can get this after a year. They can get a stamp of approval from the local dude in the pointy hat, and they increase their employment chances by about 20%.
Wow,
here.
That's a little bit sad that it takes
selling yourself out for.
Yeah, it's even worse because I had the visual of putting, one of these quarters in those vending machines, and you turn the knob, and out comes out your little Bible.
Yep, you're a
little crucifix.
You get a wafer and a can of red wine.
A little wafer.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness. 20%. That's outrageous, actually.
It is. So I tell you what. In terms of I have this story that I think you guys might be interested in. So. Can I just explain why we have Catholic schools in the first place?
By all means, please go into the history of it.
All right. So, in 1905, Alberta and Saskatchewan were both coming into Confederation at the same time. And whilst they both get brought in under separate legislation, that legislation is identical. And that will become relevant later because there's some stuff going on in Saskatchewan that will impact Alberta and Catholic schools. Now, what happened? Wilfrid Laurier, at the time, had another election coming up, and he needed the support of the Quebec Catholics to win the federal election. And of course, at the time, Catholics were concerned that it was basically the Anglicans, the Proddies, that were expanding out west. And there was some concern with the Catholics that what happened in some way, that Anglicanism would actually overtake in Canada, and they would, because there were only two religions 100 years ago, Protestantism and Catholicism.
Everybody else was just unknown.
I don't know. Anyway,
I think it's Catholicism.
So Laurier did a deal with Quebec, saying that in the newly formed provinces, that because all the public schools would likely be Protestant, that they would have enshrined rights to have what are called separate schools, so that the Catholics could have their schools as well. And so that gets rolled into something called Section 17 of the Alberta Act. Now, some people that are legally scholarly-ish will love this, because there is this ongoing debate over whether Alberta has its own constitution or whether it's part of the Canadian Constitution. The point is, it actually doesn't matter. It all ends up part of the same thing legally. Let's just. This is going to be boring for just a second. So, if any of your listeners need to go to the washroom or do anything, now's the time. I'm gonna actually read a couple of quotes. This is from the Hansard from 1905, discussing the rights that separate Catholic schools should have, because most people get absolutely blown away by what the original intent of Catholic schools were. What people don't realize is in the Constitution, it actually limits religious instruction to the last 30 minutes of the day, because Catholic schools were not meant to be Catholic all day, all the time. It was just the last 30 minutes. So in the Constitution in Alberta, religious instruction in public schools and Catholic schools is limited to the last 30 minutes of the day. Clifford Sifton, Minister of the Interior, had this to say, and I always slip into this slightly exaggerated English accent because for some reason this is how I think they spoke in 1905, so I apologise for that.
By all means.
Now, what are the characteristics? It might be Winston Churchillish. Now, what are the characteristics of this school system? We have one normal school with uniform normal training for all teachers of all schools, separate and public, uniform curricula and courses of study for all schools of the same grade, uniform textbooks for all schools, uniform qualifications of teachers for all schools, complete and absolute control of all schools as to their governance and conduct by the Central School Authority. I insert my quote here, not the church, notice, set up by the legislator under the ordinance is complete secularization. This is 1905, and this is the word they used. Complete secularization of all schools between 9 o'clock in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon, except that any school, if the trustees so desire, may open the school with the Lord's Prayer. Then, where there is a public school, the minority Protestant or Roman Catholic may organise a separate school, but every separate school is subject absolutely to all the foregoing provisions and is in every sense of the term a public school. So, very clearly here, when they set up the provision for Catholic schools, they are public schools. They are public schools in every way, shape and form, other than the last 30 minutes of the day when you have an option to teach either Protestant religious instruction or Catholic religious instruction. Now, I do have more quotes, but I just suddenly realized how boring that totally was. So I won't read the others, but I'll provide them, and then you can stick them up on a website, or we'll link to it on Twitter or something like that. But the whole point is the Hansard in 1905 absolutely makes it clear that the whole point of the separate system was just so Catholics could have Catholic religious instruction the last 30 minutes of the day to be separate from the Protestants. So why is this important? So we did a deal to have separate schools here in Alberta because of the Catholics in Quebec. Well, at the end of the last century, the Catholics in Quebec did a really interesting thing, and that was they actually amended their constitution and they got rid of separate schools.
Maybe we should do that too in Alberta.
So, but we still have them here. It's but here's the other thing that changed was we actually got rid of all our Protestant schools. Now we just have public schools, and yet we still have 400 fully publicly funded and protected separate Catholic schools. So the whole reason that we have them, Quebec, they're out of the deal. And the whole thing that they're supposed to be separate too, which is Protestant schools, we don't have anymore. So one wonders, why do we still have them? What is it the Catholic schools are separate from? Reality is not really a great answer, by the way.
But it is the correct one.
Is it possible these proponents of Catholic high schools and schools are just trying to uphold a tradition, nostalgia?
Yeah, well, it's a whole mixed bag. It is absolutely a mixed bag. There are some people that are, this is our religion, this is our right. Hell, the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket if we don't keep having some religion. We'll have, bad things will happen in schools if we don't have gods there and all this good stuff. But there are lots of people that I don't think are even religious, and they just go, we've kind of always done it this way. Actually, I tell you what, it is sold here with the two systems. It is sold completely falsely under two guises. One is that it creates competition, and that we have better education because of it.
Yeah.
And also it creates choice because, you can have one thing or the other. I mean, it is literally a choice between two things. So as choices go, it is the lowest possible choice. You could have a choice of 15 things, but so it's only really a choice if you're Catholic or if you don't care that the system is Catholic.
Well, I know they use when I was in Ontario, I grew up in Ontario, and they have the Catholic... I know, I'll get over it. They had the Catholic school board as well.
Yes.
Public schools, Catholic schools.
Yes.
The Catholic schools had the reputation of being a better school system than the public schools.
More discipline.
So, of course, me going to a public school, I was down and out. I was with the dregs of society. The people who went to the Catholic school across the canal from where I lived, well, I was on the wrong side of the tracks. They were on the right side of the tracks.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was treated in Ontario from where I grew up. So maybe that's kind of the same idea?
Yes, the same myth. Same myth is perpetuated here. The same brand, I should say, because essentially it's branding on the part of both the religion and the school system that somehow morals are taught in the Catholic school, and we don't teach morals in the public school, which is why there's so much fornication and goodness knows.
Yeah, have you seen Catholic schoolgirls? Yeah, trust me.
So, okay, I'll offer something up here. My mum was 17 and straight out of a Catholic convent. And here I am, boys and girls.
Oh my
gosh. Saint Luke.
Saint Luke. Okay.
Luke, I've got a quick question before you carry on with something like that. I keep tripping on that thing that it says in the Constitution, essentially, for the board, that it's a secular school until the last half hour of the day. Was that carried on? Do they still follow that? Because I went to Catholic school as well in Ontario, just like Scott did.
I didn't. I went to public school. I hated the Catholics.
Yeah, I hated myself too at the time. But we had. It wasn't religion taught at the end of the day. It was taught. It was an actual class, like a subject during the day that you went in was religion. Now, I'm just wondering if in Alberta they actually kept to the letter and are still teaching religion just at the end of the day, or they just decided to throw away that rule.
There is a common theme that runs amongst the religiously devout, and that is that whatever they think their religion requires is above man's law.
Yeah, of course.
And so there are several answers to this, all of which are they don't give a shit about what it says in the Constitution. So first of all, they invented something called permeation. which is not instruction, right? Permeation, religious permeation is not religious instruction. Therefore, we can religiously permeate our schools all day long because that's not instruction. That's the first thing. That's the mealy-mouthed, fast foot-tapping, dancing BS that they use to get around.
That's like putting religious symbology all over the school.
Absolutely. So, but the funny thing is, going back to this whole the fact that I fell down this rabbit hole because of the Lord's Prayer. So, there is something called Chapter 29 of the Northwest Territories School Ordinance that gets rolled into all this. Section 137.1 and .2. One part says if the trustees want to direct that a school open with the recitation of the Lord's Prayer, they can do so. And then the very next bit says there shall be no religious instruction other than the last 30 minutes of the day. Mm-hmm. So when we were at the public school and they were making every kid pray every morning, even kids that didn't want to pray, which is because, of course, freedom of religion trumps freedom from religion in the head of the religious.
Yes.
Not at the Supreme Court, mind you, thank goodness. So where were we heading with this? Prayer. Oh yeah. So the people that wanted the prayer would point to section 137.1 going, there it is, it's in the Constitution. And we would go, yes. Now look at section 137.2. No religious instruction as per the last 30 minutes of the day. But the same school is running a Logos Christian religion program during the day.
Yes.
You know, and this hypocrisy is so frustrating, you know. It's like you want it, you want all this privilege when it's in your favor, but the moment, and we see this in the US all the time, of course, right? Mm-hmm. You know, they want the Constitution, they demand all these constitutional rights, but the moment that Constitution impacts their religious privilege, then they
now it's a bad thing.
Yeah, that's right. They cry persecution and away we go. So something really, really interesting. Oh, hang on. Let me just say, here's how discriminatory and disgusting this is. So, first of all, any right-minded person is going to go, the state shouldn't be favoring one religion over any other religion, right? That's you have to be a fundamental Christian that lives and dies on this premise of Canada is a Christian country, and you know, if you don't live there, then really you have to accept that the state has to treat all things equally. You know, by the way, this is my favorite thing. This country was founded on Christian values.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we scalped the natives. We killed indiscriminately.
We raped. We stole. We conned, and then we treated the First Nations people like crap for a few centuries. And there you go. There's your Christian
values.
Anyway, I digress. So. The Ontario school system was challenged at the United Nations Human Rights Committee level in 97 or 99, and the United Nations Human Rights Committee actually came back and said, no, you can't have a school system that where one religion is favored by the state. That literally fails the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. Mm-hmm. And Canada's own Supreme Court has said, if it wasn't for the special exception that exists in our Constitution for this, you'd never be able to do this. The Catholic school system, as it is, would be completely unconstitutional. It fails the Charter in every way possible. So it isn't. There is no fairness argument. There is no it's right argument. There is only, through some fluke of history, we have this awesome privilege and we'd like to keep it. Thank you very much. But here's the problem. Here's how we fund students in Alberta, because it's slightly different than BC. You guys fund your public schools, 100%. I think it's about $11,500 a year, and you fund your private schools, I think 50%. So a Catholic school will get 50%, not that 11,500 is split. It's about 4,000 that goes to buildings, and of the remaining 7,500, 8,000, a Catholic school or a private religious school would get about 50% of that. So they're getting about $4,000 a year, something like that. In Alberta, Catholic separate schools get 100% of the money that we spend. So $12,000 per student per year, whereas a private school does get 70% of the 8,000. I hope this is making sense. Yep. Of the money that's operational. So if you are a Sikh family with 3 kids and you want your children to get a Sikh infused education, or Mormon, or Muslim, or atheist for that matter, you would have to go to a private school where you would get somewhere in the region of $5,000 a year from the state for your family to have religion-infused education. But if you're Catholic, you're getting $12,000 a year. You're $7,000 a year ahead from the state.
Yeah.
If you've got 3 kids and you're Catholic and you want your kids to get a Catholic education, and you're Sikh and you have 3 kids and you want your kids to get a Sikh education, the state actually favors the Catholic family by $250,000.
Wow.
That's not right.
No,
it's not fair.
It, like you said, it's an accident of history, and they still have that. And what you were saying essentially is, for cooler heads to prevail, if we were to eliminate this mistake, we'd have to actually amend the Constitution itself.
Yes.
Wow.
Which is very difficult to do to begin with.
No, it's not.
Okay,
Stop.
Okay, enlighten me.
No, this is another myth. Oh my God, hang on. So someone needs to remember that we're going to talk about amending the Constitution here, because it just reminded me that we missed something, and I just want to circle back on it.
Okay.
Is Catholic education better than public school education? First of all, the answer is, in some studies, yes. But there's an awful lot of studies where the answer is also no. And then because the Catholic school system is so moral and so all about doing the right things, they pull some serious chicanery on the statistics to skew them in their favor. Yeah. And it's something called full cohort and partial cohort. And so let me give you an example. Let's say you've got 100 students in a Catholic school, 100 students in a public school. What they'll do in the Catholic school, when it comes to doing their PATs, for example, or whatever it is that we're measuring, in the Catholic school, a higher percentage of those kids will actually take the exam. Okay? Mm-hmm. So let's say in the Catholic school, 97 out of the 100 students in that year will take the exam. In a public school, less kids will actually take the exam. Less of them will show up for the exam, or will take the exam for a number of different reasons. And when the Catholics produce their education results, and when they publicize them, and you can go to Edmonton Catholic Schools, their own website, and you can pull up this information, what they'll do is they'll give you a comparison between the total score that the 100 kids in their year, the average that they got of those 100 kids, of which 97 took the test,
yes,
and compare it with the overall average, and I'm trying to remember whether that's my mode, mean, or median, of the 92 kids in the public school that took it. So they don't compare actual exam results.
No,
they don't compare
they're comparing
the average of the exam results. They compare the average of kids that took it or didn't take it, because it actually works out in their favor. So there's all kinds of chicanery that goes on. Now, even if you actually compare like for like, in Edmonton, the Edmonton Catholic School District is below average in over half of their results. Well, so I don't know. I hear that it's supposed to be better, but I think it's one of those myths that's just perpetuated.
Yep.
Like, Catholic school kids are more moral and more this as well. And the other thing that I will say is, if you talk to anybody here, everybody involved in education in Alberta knows that the Catholic schools will turn away problem kids and problem families,
of course,
and coded kids that are going to be expensive. They will turn them away because they can.
And that leaves the public school system to absorb those children.
To take everybody. So when you compare these results, you're not even comparing like for like. So, any comments on that before we go back to how we amend the Constitution?
No, I think
that sounds an awful lot like what I experienced in Ontario going to school.
Yeah, exactly.
When back in the 80s, I was in high school, and that's exactly it. We had the problem kids in my high school.
Yeah, because they weren't in my school.
Well, they didn't have them in the Catholic school across the way. The Catholic school is more of an academic school.
Yeah.
We had the shops.
Well,
right?
the kids in my school, a lot of them were problematic. They had parents with more money, and they were just well hidden.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And what really pissed me, and I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this up because this is something that pissed me off from day one. My school had the shops. Now, we had a full academic. We had a big high school. But for some reason, the Catholic high school across the way, across the canal, they had the public pool, which was part of their school campus. They had the theater, which is part of their public school, or part of their Catholic school campus. So whenever there was theater in town, guess where the theater was done? Right at the Catholic high school. They had all of these opportunities. They had an air-conditioned school. We didn't have an air-conditioned school.
And you can totally tell, because to this day, Scott cannot pretend to drown properly. He didn't have the pool nor the theater.
I never learned to swim properly, which got me out of a lot of stuff in the military because I got to do the kiddie pool. Right?
Okay. So let's get back into the Constitution part of it.
Yeah, no. You remember the Constitution part. I just remembered something else.
Another detour.
Here's the other thing, and here's the thing that pisses me off here. Catholics pay for Catholic education. No, they don't.
We do.
So, the majority comes from non-Catholics, and you're forced to pay it. So, we have this thing over here called property tax. You probably don't have it in Vancouver because no one could afford it.
They're all living in their RVs.
Yep.
Anyway, so on our property tax forms, it actually still says, would you like to direct the education portion of your property tax, which I think is about 50% of it, to the Catholic school or to the public school?
Right.
And then you check where you want it to go. Now, this is completely meaningless. The fact that this exists on the property tax forms, and the fact that all the municipalities in Alberta have to put this on their forms and then count the answer to who checked what, is completely irrelevant, because the money just follows the child here, right? One way or another, wherever the kid goes, $8,000 goes.
Yeah.
The other $4,000 is just the government building new schools. Right? So wherever the kid goes, $8,000 goes. So where you direct property taxes is completely irrelevant unless you're the Catholic Church and you want to perpetuate this illusion that Catholics are paying for Catholic education. So we actually FOIP'd these numbers to find out, okay, if we actually tallied up, do Catholics pay for Catholic education? What do these numbers work out as? And they come out pretty interesting. It turns out that the average amount of directed property tax per public student in Alberta is just over $4,000 a year. The average amount of directed property tax per Catholic student in Alberta is less than $1,500 a year. So we've got a $2,500 shortfall on the directed taxes from property tax before we even start. We've got 170,000 Catholic students. That's $420 million that we, the people, through our government central pot, we've got to kick that in just to get the Catholic contribution up to the same level that the public contribution is up. So we've got to kick in 420 million just to get them to $4,000.
Wow!
And don't forget, if this was a business,
we're going to kick in another $8,000 per kid. But the argument is, yeah, but 27% of us are Catholics. Well, you know, not all Catholics go to Catholic school either. So, and no one else has the opportunity to do this anyway.
And if a politician in Alberta was to say, I need $400 million in tax money for whatever project, she would probably just run out of town.
Oh, it's absolutely insane.
I was going to say, if this was a business, you would shut a business down if it was running like that. You would look at that.
Well, go on.
You would look at that segment of the business, let's say, call the entire provincial school system a business, and you see that one side of that business is losing that kind of money or is shortfalling that kind of money, you would actually look at it and say it's time to shut that down.
Yeah.
Yes, you would.
That's costing us.
Now, to be fair, and it gets a little bit complex, I will say, you know, most of those students would ultimately still get educated within a public system one way or another, so we would still pay for them. Mm-hmm. The whole point is Catholics don't pay for Catholic education. Non-Catholics subsidize it by a very big sum of money. But to your point, because you are exactly right, running two duplicate non-cooperative systems does waste a lot of money.
Yeah, huge.
And we think that sum of money is about $200 million a year. And $200 million a year wasted to favor one religion over and above all others, taken out of the education fund, taken out of the classrooms, that's a lot of money. You know, that's a lot of teachers. It's a lot of new schools.
That's a sick way of doing things.
This $200 million, does that account for the bureaucracy, the government administration of all this Catholic school system as well?
Yeah, this is difficult because no one will give you the numbers.
Okay.
So I will tell you, I've been involved in this now, I think, for something like 7 years. I think the number's higher than $250 million. The best numbers we think we can reasonably substantiate are 200 million. But there are people here, including politicians, that will say, no, there's no cost saving. There's no cost saving here. And you go, so recently, I'm assuming it happened out west as well, Best Buy closed all the Future Shop stores.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Right. Now, here's the thing. If I want electronics, I still seem to be able to get electronics in my town. I still have, not only do I have Best Buy, but there are other electronic stores in my town as well. Mm-hmm. And so Best Buy as a business got rid of all these duplicate stores in all these towns, and yet still manages to actually provide this wide choice of electronics to everybody in the town, but they cut their overheads and increase their profits.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there you go. That's the same as us here, putting two schools. So I live in St. Albert. Right now, we are building, I will send you these photographs because you have to tweet them out here. They're building two new schools. But the way that, of course, religion works is every time you get a new neighborhood, the Catholics want a new school in that new neighborhood as well. And we're trying to push initiatives here saying the first school in every neighborhood should always be a public school. Mm. And then if we're going to do this separate school thing, then at least, make the Catholic school the second one. But it never happens. So we actually build two brand new schools.
Oh my God, really?
Right next to each other. They're right next to each other. It's completely bonkers.
What a waste of money.
Yes.
Wait, so they're not even separated so you can catch more students?
Exactly. I mean, one school might be enough to serve the population of this new neighborhood, and you have two schools that are going to be
barely
empty, pretty much empty.
That's
whereas what we could do is we could put the second school could go in another neighborhood.
Yeah,
Another
totally.
neighborhood could be better serviced with a local school. Hey, and guess what? Now we're not putting kids on buses and busing them past schools that they could walk to because the school either has a cross or doesn't have a cross, which is completely mad. Anyway, so there was a great quote from the old superintendent of Red Deer Public Schools who was trying to be very political and very was actually trying not to be contentious at all, but he accidentally said something that was brilliant. In this stretch of northwest Red Deer, they're building 3 new schools. They're building a francophone Catholic school, a Catholic school, and a public school, and they're all next to each other.
Wow.
And there was this whole thing. Ooh, actually, a little bit of gossip here. So we'll throw some gossip into today's thing as well. So what happened was there was an initiative for the public school and the Catholic school to share the sports field, share busing, share this, share that. And it seems like a really great idea because even if you're going to do this whole stupid thing, we might as well be the most efficient we can, because the Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association has actually had a policy for 20 years now to not share things, right? The Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association does not want to share schools or busing. They don't want the Catholic kids with the public kids.
Well, we wouldn't want them mixing. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, critical thinking
They
cooties
might
or something.
they might talk about like evolution or like proper sex ed.
Yes. Well, I'll give the Catholics they've got evolution down.
That's good.
Although if you go back far enough, they still have a problem because you can't have original sin and evolution. But anyway, a conversation for another day. So they're building the schools, and the public school board is voting on whether to be part of this joint program. And they're right down to going, yeah, we're going to do it because sharing makes sense to us. And then someone introduces into the board meeting the fact that the Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association has this policy where it won't share things. And they go, well, this isn't good. We're signing up to be tied into an agreement where basically a bishop could veto a public education initiative. So they say, no, they vote against sharing being a part of this program. Mysteriously, about 2 days after this vote takes place, a new special emergency education board meeting is called that's held 8 days later after this non-sharing vote. This board meeting takes about 15 minutes. They vote on 4 things. There are no speakers. Nothing is introduced into not evidence, but no information is introduced for consideration. No one speaks to any issues, and they suddenly reverse their vote.
What?
Yeah, it's very strange.
Strange is not the word here.
Yeah, well, it looks something like my guess, and I want to tiptoe a little bit here, but it looks suspiciously like potential government involvement, looking something like it would be a shame if something were to happen to that nice new bright Chinese school of yours.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what goes on here about this.
Luke,
anyway,
we're running against the clock here, so let's go back on that constitutional question that we were asking about. You were saying you wanted to debunk the myth that it's difficult to change on the constitutional level.
So there are different kinds of constitutional amendment in Canada. If you want to amend the constitution in a way that impacts another province, then you have to do, I can't remember what it's called, but then you have to do the whole fancy pants constitutional amendment where you got to get 2/3 of the provinces and half the people in all the provinces to all vote, and then you can. But that's a constitutional amendment that affects Canada.
Yeah.
When you have a constitutional amendment that only impacts your province, and incidentally, education is the sole purview of the province. Mm-hmm. You actually you just get a rubber stamp from the feds. So what can happen right now in Alberta? We have an NDP government, not the same NDP government that you've got, by the way. Apparently, there are some differences between the two.
Yes.
Cheers, by the way.
They have differences of opinion for sure.
I would cheers you with a glass of wine, but I don't have any here.
Our American audience is not going to understand this joke, but that's okay.
Okay. So, but anyway, so we have a majority government here. To change the constitution to disestablish separate schools here in Alberta, all that would have to happen is the government would have to pass a motion saying that we don't have to have a plebiscite here in Alberta. So they just passed that motion. They've got a majority government. That's done. And then they would pass another piece of legislation saying that they want to disestablish a separate school system. They have a majority government. They whip their guys. It passes. It goes to the feds. It goes to the House of Commons. The House of Commons votes on it. It goes to the Upper House. The Upper House votes on it. For those that care about details, the Upper House doesn't have to vote on it. They can send it back to the Commons, and the Commons can vote on it again. The point is there are two federal votes. In the history of Canada, the feds have never refused a constitutional amendment that only impacted that province. It is a rubber stamp. So if you have a majority government, then it's a done deal. And I should just finish this with, keep your eye out, kids. What happened in Saskatchewan is a court case called Theodore, where the Court of Queen's Bench ruled last year that it was unconstitutional for non-Catholic kids to get public funding to go to Catholic schools because they were separate schools intended just for Catholics, and they're taking money out of the public system. Brad Wall, who is a Christian ex-premier, invoked the notwithstanding clause to overrule the Court of Queen's Bench. It's going off to the Court of Appeal, then it's going off to the Supreme Court. In 6 years' time, the Supreme Court, give or take, is going to say whether non-Catholic students can receive public funds to go to Catholic schools. The answer is almost certainly going to be no, and an awful lot of Catholic schools are suddenly going to become very financially unviable. There you go.
Goodness gracious.
Wow.
Thank you so much for illuminating us on all this, Luke. This is beyond what I knew of the...
Yeah.
And the scope is much greater than I thought I knew about this. If people want to learn more and help you guys in your efforts in Alberta or anywhere else in the country, where can they reach you?
So my personal Twitter social media thing is According to Luke. So that's according number 2 Luke. You can get me on Twitter or on Facebook on that. Our Facebook group is called A Pupil, APUPIL, Albertan Parents for Unbiased Public Inclusive Learning. That's a great group. There's also another great group called OurIdea.ca, which is actually led by a Christian ex-education minister here to disestablish a separate school system. And can I also give a plug to the Alberta Secular Conference that is going on this May in Calgary? Google the Alberta Secular Conference in May. Lots of great speakers going on there as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Absolutely. You can totally plug that in. Thank you so much, Luke. Before I let you go, I got to have you say, hi, I'm Luke Fevin, and I took a left at the valley.
Hi, I'm Luke Fevin, and I took a hard left at the valley.
And that was our friend, Luke Fevin. This guy just... Amazing knowledge of all this stuff. I could see politics in this guy's face.
I want to go change the Constitution now, guys.
Let's go change the Constitution. Sure, and what kind of school do you think we should have?
Pastafarian.
There we go. Now we're talking.
I think that we should do a big push to get the Catholic school board out and get the Pastafarian school board in.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Friday's off.
Yeah.
Right? Because Fridays are a holiday.
Yeah.
Well, actually, almost every day's a holiday.
You can have Taco Tuesday and Spaghetti Wednesday.
Yes, there you go.
I didn't know about Spaghetti Wednesday.
Every day could be Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Yep.
Yeah, you can have Pirate Class. Oh.
Pirate Class. Avast, scurvy dogs.
You could choose. You can take French or Pirate.
I'll take Pirate, thank you.
Yeah, I'd take French.
Oh,
I'll learn
goodness
it.
gracious.
Avast, scurvy dogs.
It only works if you have a good teacher.
Aboard.
Time for my rant. The federal government announced it was going to help subsidize the press this week. And already the tweets from the conservatives are hitting the fan. Al Gore once said that the press is like the immune system of a democracy. It keeps disease stories at bay. When the Fifth Estate fails, you end up with a sick, corrupt democracy. And you really just have to turn your gaze south of the 49th parallel to see a glorious example of this. Does any advocate and skeptic today look upon the American press as a reliable source? Heck no. I even heard many Americans would rather turn to the BBC or even the CBC when it comes to getting accurate information. Back in the days of St. Reagan, the actor-president dismantled the laws governing the press. It was no longer necessary to tell the truth in the U.S. What made the news is what sells. Fast forward 34 years, and the term fake news is not even used to point out erroneous claims, but to shut down conversation that doesn't allow or doesn't follow the narrative. False news has become big business, and the average Joe doesn't even know what's true anymore. They are now sheep. They're manipulated by cons to try to keep other con men in power. So why are conservatives in an uproar over this? Sure, they bellow out the Big Brother scare and how government will interfere in what's published, but that has never really happened in Canada. Government has always been beyond arm's length in those matters. They will try to sell you that privatization is best, and that the businesses can't survive on its own, then it should die. Really? You want the press to be a for-profit model? How well did that work in the US, or even your local town? The local paper has become little more than a flyer. They have no reporters, and if you don't purchase advertising, good luck getting a story published unless it's a murder. No, the conservatives are angry at this because they try to control the narrative. We've seen this in the US with Fox News, and their attempt to bring it up here in Canada with Sun News, which later became Rebel Media. The right wing underestimated Canadians. It seems we prefer the truth over partisan politics. Now you might be asking yourself, why are conservatives so preoccupied with all this? Is it because they are true blue conservatives that despise government and embrace free markets? Like they shout at you when they rally with heavily subsidized big oil and ask government to regulate euthanasia or abortion? Doubtful. It's because they're a dying breed, and they know it. Most conservative voters are in the senior population. They've seen the sign of the young progressive generation that follows, and the numbers prove it. Today, it's almost impossible for the conservatives to actually win an election unless the turnout is low. And that's why they hate the press. It's a lot easier to muddy the waters, confuse the electorate, and create apathy amongst an uninformed or misinformed population. That's how they win. They cannot destroy the Fifth Estate. People wouldn't stand for that. But they can recreate it in their own image, and they will try. So it's up to all of us to stop them and allow the immune system of our democracy to stand strong and do its job. And that takes us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show, guys. I really appreciate you joining us, as usual. Next week, we'll have our big show with Dr. Del Rey and Dr. Veronica Duran, and we're going to bring the science to the whole LGBTQ attacks that's been going on, even in the school system, as we were talking today. And in March, we'll be talking to Rebecca Fox about cartoons, and we'll also have Ira Pastor of the Biomimicry Institute. That should be
so excited about that.
That's going to be a good show.
Our old friend Christopher DiCarlo is coming back to see us on the 17th on St. Patrick's Day, and he'll be talking about how he was refused tenure twice as a university professor for being an atheist.
Seriously?
Absolutely. And this is in Ontario.
Wow.
And then on the 24th, we'll be talking to Robert Stanley of the Right to Reason podcast. He's got a great show, he's got a great voice, and I highly encourage you guys to check out this show. And at the end of the month of March, we'll be talking to Ethan Siegel about the science of Star Trek.
Oh my gosh.
I'm excited for this.
I feel like a horrible nerd because I haven't watched any Star Trek other than the new movies.
Oh, really? That's
I know.
Okay. We'll learn.
I haven't either.
To be fair, I grew up on Stargate.
Yeah.
So.
We're going to teach you. We're going to show you the granddaddy of sci-fi TV.
Don't get her started on Stargate.
And of course, on the beginning of April, we have singer-songwriter Shelley Siegel.
She's amazing.
That's going to come and talk to us.
You guys should just go listen to her music so it's all ready.
Yes, absolutely. If you listened to the show last week, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
You can follow us on leftatvalley.com. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, at LETV Podcast. You can send us an email, leftatvalley@outlook.com. Send your complaints to Nancy, who's not here this week, on the third floor. And don't forget to follow our little sister show, Tyler, our friend Tyler Laguerre, and Kevin Swansky at So You Think You're a Skeptic on Facebook Live. Anything else I need to mention?
And?
Sorry, I was just thinking how long you'd wait.
Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
Harry Potter.
so of course.
Or, no, I'm actually changing it. Go watch Black Panther. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's coming out this weekend. I need to see that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's so
Like,
good.
Just go watch it, guys.
Yeah.
Go watch it.
I've just been into Longmire for the last little while, right? I'm just having fun with
Specifically,
Westerns.
go opening weekend so that they get the revenue. So they're like, oh, we should do more movies like this,
yeah,
I
exactly.
guess.
I don't go to the
like they're
movies
going to be
anymore. I wait
starving.
till they're out on Netflix. or I wait till I can cheat download them.
How could you?
The comments to Scott are not necessarily those elected bells.
Saw that one coming.
Thank you so much, guys. Until next time.
Does his very best to keep it on the hush. Don't wanna affect business, he loves money too much. We know that they love the kids, but how the fuck can we protect them while they planning to molest them? We teaching them to respect them.
Fuck that.
The system is broke down, working backwards, and the only action or tactic I plan to practice now is to attack them. The parties of God's hands are bloodstained, millions of murders by believers, and they're all in God's name. And let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, unintended, I find it disgraceful that many atheists are told to be quiet.